Hi everyone, delighted to be joined here today for one of our episodes of TechCast with Paul Clarke. Paul, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Paul Clarke. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Ocado.
Paul, you're obviously on Tech's advisory board, which has been instrumental in building out tech. Why do you think tech is a landmark event?
Well, I think the combination of retail and technology is a very, very exciting space. Obviously that's the intersection that we work at Ocado, and it brings everything there, everything from sort of AI and machine learning and analytics through fulfillment, the last mile, understanding customer behaviors and desires. So you have everything from the physical to the digital, and I suppose as a business, that's the intersection that we work at. How to move stuff around efficiently.
Yeah, absolutely. And why do you think retailers should attend Tech?
Well, I think the reason to attend Tech is to be inspired. It is to hear stories about how people are either thinking of doing amazing things with technology, or doing things, or and actually coming away, hopefully, with lots of ideas about how you can apply them to your own businesses.
So tech investment and digital transformation across the industry is growing at an unprecedented scale. What do retailers need to be doing to keep up with this? Where should they be placing their bets?
Well, I think it's a spread bet. You need to be playing across the whole spectrum. Everything from customer analytics and how to use things like AI and machine learning at the front end to understand your customers better, to create better recommendations, greater personalization, things like that. How to drive efficiencies into the end-to-end process of getting goods to your customers, whether that be like we do it with huge automated warehouses, or whether that be in stores. And then the last mile is super important, because that's often where a lot of the cost goes, is actually getting it to the customer. But it's an end-to-end piece.
That's quite interesting, because that kind of ties into what we obviously landed on, the theme for the tech sprint. So how can retailers create convenience for the customer? Yeah. Do you have any tips for the teams that will be participating in that 24-hour hackathon and trying to solve that? Do you have any tips of kind of what you think the end product might look like, or should look like, and what would be kind of useful for?
My tip would really be to think holistically about that problem, because I think although people often segment it into being about fulfillment and then the last mile, and I think really we need to think much more holistically about the supply, the end-to-end process of supply chain, fulfillment, and last mile. How do we produce stuff closer to the customer? How do we drive personalization into that process? I think that's the interesting bit. How do we create new business models for getting things to people efficiently, rather than everybody just doing their own thing?
Absolutely. And in terms of kind of partnerships evolving and kind of ecosystems evolving, which we're obviously seeing more and more of, obviously, Ocado, of course, works with many retail partners and has its own kind of ecosystem as well. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about what makes a great partnership? So, where should companies be looking to partner? What should they be building in-house? According to your kind of experience.
Well, I suppose Ocado is a bit of an extreme version of this, because we are horribly self-sufficient. We pretty much build everything for ourselves. Yeah. That's always been our model, and now that's obviously put us in a good place to be able to provide that end-to-end platform, to our international customers. So we're probably not a typical example, but I think the most important thing is figure out where you add, real value, and be willing to hand off to somebody else, if you like, the things that either you're not so good at, or, as I say, where you don't add value, or where you don't, which are not sources of competitive advantage, because you can't do everything, and increasingly, we're doing that ourselves. So although, as I say, we are very self-sufficient, we're definitely buying more than we used to. But I think that's the whole platform play. That's what's started with the cloud companies, but now is spreading out to other players, including ourselves, where what you're doing is you're taking away a problem, or you're allowing people to buy a solution that they could never afford to build for themselves, because it's now the cost of the R&D is spread across many customers, and that's obviously at the center of the platform model. So, but I think at the heart of that is really working out, what business are you in, where do you add real value, and focus on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, kind of tech is a great place to meet potential partners as well. If you're looking to kind of, partner and kind of leverage your specialties.
Absolutely, and I think that's where, I'm very passionate about the whole area of intersectional thinking. Getting out there, meeting people who will disrupt your thinking in some way. Don't just hang out with people who are going to agree with you. Go off and, including talking to people who come from radically different sectors to the one that you operate in. Because I think that whole idea of how you take an idea from, a completely different area and apply it to your own business, it's certainly at the center of what we try to do, because that's the only way you already drive completely new forms of innovation into your thinking and into your business.
Absolutely. Which other sectors do you look to for kind of inspiration?
Oh, crikey, all over the place. Really, things very, very far away from online retail. I don't know, everything from, I have conversations with people in defense and nuclear and really all over the place. And that's partly because now we're no longer just focused on grocery. My part of the business is all about taking the innovation assets we've accumulated over 18 years and going off and playing in some of those other sectors to hopefully disrupt them. So it kind of makes sense for us to do that. But even while we were, obviously, parts of the business absolutely still are focused very much on retail and the platform play there. Even for those parts, I think it's crucial to look wider than your own backyard, because people are solving really interesting problems in unusual ways, and you want to try and capitalize on that.
Absolutely, yeah. And in terms of tech, so with a capital T, obviously, our event, what does it mean for you in one word? How could you kind of summarize tech in one word?
Well, I think it is about inspiration. I think it's about the stories, hearing stories that inspire you. I think it's about hopefully inspiring, the next generation of people coming into the industry or thinking of coming into the industry about, the sense of the possible. I think it's about, as I say, hearing from people who are doing things in radically different ways to maybe, what you thought about doing as a business. And I think the most useful thing from a conference like Tech is to come away, inspired and excited and perhaps challenged, by the things you've heard, because it's often not just what is you hear on the stage. It's the ideas that it triggers in your own mind of, oh my goodness, actually we could do that, And for me, that's the most valuable takeaway when I go to a conference, as I say, is to have my thinking challenged or disrupted in some way.
Great. So yeah, Paul, in terms of culture, obviously it's such a hot topic within any business, particularly retail as well, and with talent obviously being quite tech talent being quite a shortage, I guess, or a bigger demand than before. How do you think companies should be retaining talent? What should culture look like within a company, and where should it come from as well within a retail business?
I'm completely passionate about the subject of culture. I think it's at the center of not just how you hire and retain talent. It's at the center of the engine room of how you drive innovation, or in our case, disruptive innovation, in a reproducible, scalable way. It's the kind of the glue that brings the people together. And I feel it's absolutely crucial that one looks after culture. I often use the analogy of cultural gardening. You have to tend it like a garden. You've got, you need to lay out the beds. You need to work out which different bits of the business need to have maybe which kind of nuances of culture. You need to allow them to perhaps flourish in different ways. It's not like a one size fits all, but you do need to look after it. Otherwise you will wake up one day and find that the weeds have taken over, It's not one of those things that somehow you should just leave it to its own devices. I think it's a core part of the leadership of an organization, of how you make sure your culture evolves in the direction. And of course it will evolve, because what it's like in a startup is going to be very different, but there are going to be the things that you need to try and actively protect as the business matures and look after. And I think no cultures are perfect, but one of the things that's certainly kept me at Ocado for 13 years, despite the fact I only went there to do a 1-year project, was the fact that we do have a special culture, and I think it's changed, but we've managed to do a lot of that cultural gardening to look after it, and we're constantly asking ourselves how it could be better. And sometimes you also then need to allow parts of the organization to float free, and we're kind of grappling with that one as well, because the mothership will get bigger and more powerful, and it needs to focus on some stuff, but then you need to find ways to spread your DNA beyond that, and maybe how you spin out other businesses, how you incubate new ideas, but not just by sticking necessarily a kind of an incubation unit on the side and hoping that's going to do it all. I believe passionately that innovation and that kind of spirit has to be embedded throughout the organization, and that's really what I think is at the heart of the cultural piece.
Yeah, so not necessarily from the top down.
Absolutely not. Yeah. No, I mean the more ideas you can get on solving a problem, the better. And I think that's where I suppose what we've always tried to do is, whenever we've had a problem that we could solve, we've not really gone out to consultants and said solve it for us. What we've done is we've gone out and found more talent, add to the gene pool, because once you do that, you can then solve the problem the next time, and that's why I think growing competencies is the most important thing. The outcomes along the way are important, but the long-term game is about growing competencies, because once you've learned how to do something in one place, you can then apply it to lots of other places. Anyway, that's very much at the heart of our kind of innovational model.
Where do you find this talent? Where do you look?
I think you need to look for talent, not in unusual places, and I think you also need to be willing to accept it won't necessarily come packaged, in the neat kind of sizes or form factors that and something I often talk about is the idea of rather than growing a business in a regular way, like you might put up a brick wall, nice regularly shaped pieces, that may be fast, but it's definitely not diverse. It's very linear, and frankly, it's rather boring. And I think our approach has been much more akin to dry stone walling, where you take irregularly shaped individuals, you put them together in creative ways, they lock together, they form cohesive teams, and that diversity that comes from that is certainly core to what we do in terms of innovation, but I think it's true for our organizations too. You need, and that's where you need a culture that can accommodate, attract, people of all different, you could say shapes and sizes, but actually it's about diversity, in all the ways, not just, the usual things. It's mindset, it's experience, it's ways of thinking, it's approach, and that's crucially important in order to future-proof your business, because, if everybody is similar, then something comes along as a new challenge and you probably can't respond to it. But if you have that diversity, then hopefully you can tap into it and come up with creative solutions to those new challenges.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think hit the nail on the head with that one.